State of North Carolina vs. Gregory Flint Taylor. Lindsay Clem. Summary. On September 26, 1991, Gregory Flint Taylor was wrongfully accused of murdering Jacquetta Thomas and convicted in 1993. Took place in Raleigh, North Carolina. Taylor was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Taylor was freed after 16 years in prison. How it happened. Gregory and his friend Johnny Beck were out partying the night before Jacquetta Thomas was found. Taylor parked the vehicle in a cul-de-sac on South Blount Street with little to nothing nearby to get high, crack cocaine. Tried to leave but the vehicle was stuck in the mud, forcing them to walk to get a ride. Beck and Taylor saw the body of Jacquetta Thomas, but convinced themselves it was a mannequin. Taylor and Beck crossed paths with Barbara Ray. She took them back to her house located nearby and they continued to party. The next morning, Becky and Gregory Taylor dropped their 9-year-old daughter off at school and went back to cul-de-sac to retrieve his vehicle. Police were already there and instantly interrogated him about his night. Gregory offered to hand his clothes over along with hair samples and even a polygraph test from the night before to prove his innocence. He was denied a polygraph test for unknown reasons. The goal of the investigators and police officers involved in this case was to find the person truly guilty of the murder of Jacquetta Thomas, so why would they not give Taylor the polygraph to either prove his guilt or innocence? If he passed, they would know that they were looking at the wrong person, and if he failed, then he at least had something to do with it or knew something about the situation. The top right circle is where the vehicle was stuck in the mud. The bottom circle was where Jacquetta Thomas was found the next morning. Gregory Taylor's attorney. James F. Blackburn was the attorney assigned to Gregory Taylor's case. He later lost his right to practice law in January of 1993 after being convicted of several felonies such as forgery, embezzlement and obstruction of justice. After Blackburn resigned, Gregory Taylor had only 8 weeks to find another attorney willing to take his case. Michael Dodd took Blackburn's place and the case went to trial in April of 1993. According to Bowen's article, Elliot Cohen states that attorneys should not exchange money for wrongful purposes or in wrong amounts. Cohen, 2015, which Blackburn did in the form of embezzlement. He also says that attorneys should avoid harming others in the process of helping the client, but have loyalty to the client. Cohen, 2005. Earlier that morning, Raleigh police officer Brad Keenan and officer Peterson headed to the cul-de-sac after reporting for their shift at 7 a.m. The cul-de-sac served as a meet-up spot for several of the Raleigh Police Department officers. Officer Keenan first saw Jacquetta Thomas around 7:35 a.m. He asked Officer Peterson to shut down the street to prevent people from coming or leaving the scene. Officer Keenan called his precinct to notify them of what he had found, and the precinct then dispatched 3 more officers, a supervisor and the City-County Bureau of Identification. Earlier that morning, continued, Jacquetta Thomas' pants and underwear were around her ankles when the officers arrived. There was a large amount of blood caked around the victim's neck. Officer Keenan escorted the EMS to the victim to confirm that the victim was indeed dead. In the Ethics and Police chapter of Ethics for Criminal Justice Professionals, it states that officers should be able to stand on their own without having to be justified or backed up, and Officer Keenan was successfully able to do so. Officer Keenan did what was expected of him, both ethically and professionally. K-9 Officer Currin and K-9 Sadie. Sadie was a bloodhound K-9 trained in scent discrimination. After allowing the K-9 to attach to the scent, he released her to follow the victim's scent. K-9 Sadie was never trained to take a scent from the body and follow it to a vehicle. Officer Currin admitted that there was an instance in the past where he was asked with both of his canines to get a scent off a deceased person, and he told his superior officer that Sadie was not trained to do so, and his superior officer told him to do it anyway. As a higher-ranking officer, it makes no sense as to why someone would give the okay to do something when they knew they were not trained to properly complete the task. The officer also told the courtroom that there was no scent strong enough for K-9 Sadie to strongly detect and follow. However, the court allowed Officer Currin's testimony to be used. City-County Bureau of Identification. Donald H. Pagani was an agent with the City-County Bureau of Identification. His job was to assist the Raleigh Police Department in homicide investigation, collecting all kinds of evidence along with testing that evidence, documenting and photographing the scene. He photographed and videotaped the crime scene for documentation purposes. Afterwards, he and his team took measurements of the position of the body, cul-de-sac, and the relationship to the curb. Agent Pagani was concerned about possible trace evidence being ruined in transport, so he removed her clothing and shoes and then secured them. In the trial transcript, he stated that the medical examiner normally does not approve of derobing the body before examination. Why he did do it? What was so different between this case and other homicide cases where the clothing articles are left on the victim until examination by the medical examiner? Medical examiner. Deborah Radish was the medical examiner assigned to examining Jacquetta Thomas' body. She served as an expert witness during the trial. She discovered that Miss Thomas had some bleeding on the brain along with a suture-fractured skull. Jacquetta Thomas' airway was also crushed into 4 different pieces. She told the jury that she believed the cause of death was blunt traumatic or blunt force trauma to the head/neck. There was no evidence of Miss Thomas being physically hit by a car. Medical examiner continued there were 0.72 milligrams per deciliter of cocaine in her body found in the toxicology report. There were small, dark hairs found on the victim's cheek taken for testing, but the results were never revealed to the jury. A sexual assault evidence kit was performed due to her pants being found down around her ankles. Her underwear was tested for semen and the results were positive. Detective Johnny Howard. Detective Johnny Howard was the investigator in charge of investigating the case. In the courtroom, he admitted that he had minimal training in investigations. It was revealed that he told Gregory Taylor that a witness had given him both Taylor and Beck's description, but in reality just told the detective that he saw 2 black males. In fact, Gerald Smith, who was that witness, said he saw nothing regarding the murder of Jacquetta Thomas, and only saw 2 black males in that area around that time of night. It is understood that a detective's job is to get a confession, but when it is brought about in an unethical way, does it still have any true worth? Eva Kelly. Eva Kelly was also a prostitute said to have known Jacquetta. She crossed paths with Gregory Taylor and Johnny Beck when they were trying to find a ride home, after leaving the vehicle in the cul-de-sac. She told the jury that the 2 men were seen in their kitchen with Jacquetta, getting high. She was specifically asked while giving her testimony to the court if anyone had promised her anything for giving her statement, and she had said no, but in another transcript that was found, it was revealed that Mr. Ford offered to get her 2 5-year sentences run concurrently instead of consecutively for her statements. Is it possible that Mr. Ford approached Miss Kelly before Detective Blackman had seen her? Mr. Ford settling an agreement with Miss Kelly was an example of prosecutors behaving badly, as discussed in the textbook. Conclusion. In April of 1993, Gregory Flint Taylor was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Jacquetta L. Thomas. He spent 16 years in prison before being overturned by a 3-panel judge in February of 2010. He received compensation by the state of North Carolina amounting to $750,000, and he also received $4.625 million after a settled lawsuit between Taylor and the state of North Carolina, Denzel, 2012.